My dead brother called me 3 days after our mother was buried, and the first thing he said was, "Do not let Harper answer the next phone call." I had returned to Graywater Lake only to empty the house, sign the papers, and leave before the place could remind me why I had stayed away for 18 years. The house stood at the end of a narrow road in northern Michigan, surrounded by pine trees that leaned toward the water as though they were listening. From the kitchen window, the lake looked less than 100 yards away, flat and black beneath the October sky. People in town called it peaceful. I had never understood how anyone could look at that water and feel safe. My younger brother Lucas had disappeared beneath its surface when he was 15. I was 17, and although everyone had spent nearly 2 decades telling me it was an accident, the lake had never felt accidental to me. It felt patient. My mother, Evelyn, had died in the same house without ever selling it, without ever moving her bedroom away from the window facing the shore, and without once allowing anyone to remove the old wall telephone from the kitchen. The phone had not worked in more than 10 years. The service had been disconnected, and the cord had been cut so close to the wall that only a pale plastic stub remained. I checked it myself on the night I arrived because grief makes people do strange things, and because I had spent 12 years working as an emergency dispatcher before the sound of strangers in their worst moments finally drove me away from the job. Before Lucas died, I had also earned an open water diving certification through a county summer program. The certification never expired, but I had not worn a mask or entered deep water since the accident. I knew telephones. I knew crossed lines, electrical feedback, pre-recorded scams, and the ways frightened minds could turn static into familiar voices. I also knew a disconnected phone could not ring. At 2:13 in the morning, it rang anyway. I was standing at the kitchen counter with a cardboard box open in front of me, sorting through my mother's unpaid bills and grocery receipts, when the first ring split the silence. I froze with an envelope in my hand. The second ring sounded louder, sharp and old-fashioned, the kind of mechanical bell that seemed to vibrate inside the walls. I looked toward the hallway, expecting my niece Harper to appear from the guest room, but the house remained still. The third ring came with a faint tremor in the window glass. I walked to the phone, telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. An old alarm, a hidden wireless receiver, something my brother Daniel had installed and forgotten to mention. By the fourth ring, I was close enough to see the receiver shaking against the cradle. I lifted it. At first, I heard only a low rushing sound, like water moving through a long pipe. Then came a soft electrical hum, followed by a breath that seemed to break apart into bubbles. "Hello," I said. The line crackled. A boy whispered my name. Not Mara as Daniel said it, quick and flat. Not Ms. Ellison as callers had said it at work. He stretched the first syllable the way Lucas always had when he wanted me to stop being angry with him. Mara. My hand tightened around the receiver. Every rational thought I had vanished beneath the sound of his voice. He was 15 again, standing outside my bedroom with wet hair and a guilty smile, asking me to cover for him after he missed curfew. "Who is this?" I asked, though I already knew what the voice wanted me to believe. "Do not let Harper answer the next phone call." His words were faint, but each one was clear. Behind him, something metallic groaned in a slow rhythm. "Where are you?" I asked. The question came out before I could stop it. There was a pause, then a distant sound like a church bell ringing underwater. "The lights are still on," he said. "I can see them below me." I pressed the receiver harder against my ear. "Lucas." A wet clicking noise moved across the line. "She has already heard me," he whispered. "Who has heard you?" "Harper." The kitchen clock ticked above the stove. I glanced at it. 2:13. The second hand had stopped between the numbers. "What do you want from her?" I asked. The rushing sound grew louder. For one terrible instant, I thought I heard many voices speaking. Beneath his, all of them repeating different names. Lucas inhaled sharply. "Do not let her go to the bell tower." "What bell tower?" "Mara, listen to me." Mom knew the calls would start again when the lake got cold. My skin tightened along my arms. Outside, the porch light flickered once. Across the yard, a thin line of mist moved from the shore toward the house. "Our mother is dead," I said. "I know." The way he answered frightened me more than the call itself. There was no sadness in his voice, only certainty. She left something in her room. I looked toward the hallway. My mother's bedroom door had been locked since the morning of the funeral. Daniel said he did not know where she had kept the key. What did she leave? I asked. The bell sounded again, closer this time. Lucas began counting under his breath. 54. 55. 56. Lucas, wait. Do not believe everything I say. What? There is always one lie. At 57, the line went dead. I remained beside the wall with the receiver pressed to my ear, listening to an empty dial tone that should not have existed. Then a floorboard creaked behind me. Harper stood at the end of the hallway in an oversized sweatshirt, her dark hair loose around her face. She was 19, but in the weak kitchen light, she looked much younger. Her eyes were fixed on the phone. Was it him, she asked. I lowered the receiver slowly. You knew this would happen. Harper did not answer. Lucas said you have heard him before. Her face lost what little color it had. Aunt Mara, I can explain. How many times has he called you? She looked toward the windows and whispered, 3. Before I could ask another question, a ringing sound came from inside my mother's locked bedroom. It was not the wall phone. It was softer, muffled by the closed door, but unmistakable. One ring, then another. Harper backed away. That is not supposed to happen, she said. I crossed the hallway and tried the knob. Locked. The ringing continued. I searched the frame and found a brass key resting on top of the trim, exactly where Lucas used to hide spare keys when we were children. The lock opened with a stiff click. The room beyond smelled of cedar, cold dust, and my mother's lavender hand cream. The bed was made. The curtains were closed. No telephone was visible anywhere, yet the ringing continued from the dresser. I stepped inside and found a small cassette recorder sitting beneath the mirror. Its red light glowed. The tape wheels were turning. The ringing stopped, replaced by static, then by the sound of water and Harper's recorded voice saying, Uncle Lucas, where are you? The recording stopped before I could reach the machine, but Harper's voice stayed in the room like someone had left a door open in winter. I stood in my mother's locked bedroom with one hand on the brass knob and the other pressed against my chest, listening to the silence that followed. The room smelled faintly of cedar, cold dust, and the lavender hand cream my mother had used for as long as I could remember. Nothing looked disturbed. The narrow bed was made. The curtains were tied back. Her reading glasses rested on the nightstand beside a glass of water that had gone cloudy days ago. There was no telephone anywhere. Only a small cassette recorder on the dresser, its red light glowing even though I had not touched it. I crossed the room slowly and pressed the stop button. The light went dark. Then the tape clicked, rewound by itself, and Harper's voice played again. Uncle Lucas, where are you? This time I heard something beneath her words. A low electrical hum, water moving through a pipe, and far away, almost too faint to notice, a bell ringing once. Harper appeared behind me in the doorway, barefoot and pale, wearing an oversized sweatshirt from Michigan State. You were not supposed to find that yet, she said. I turned so quickly that my shoulder struck the dresser. How long have you been talking to him? She looked past me at the recorder. For a moment, she seemed younger than 19. 3 weeks. The answer made the room tilt. Lucas has been dead for 18 years. I know what everyone says. This is not about what everyone says. My voice came out sharper than I intended. This is about someone pretending to be him and calling this house. Harper folded her arms across herself. He knew. Things. People can learn things. He knew what Grandma called you when you were little. I said nothing. My mother had called me Birdie until I was 12, but only inside the house, and only when no one else was around. Harper continued. He knew about the blue marble you buried under the back steps. He knew you hated the sound of ice cracking on the lake. He knew you used to sleep in the hallway outside his room after thunderstorms. Each detail landed with the quiet certainty of a key turning inside an old lock. I had never told Harper any of those things. What did he want? I asked. She glanced toward the window, where Graywater Lake lay black beneath the moon. He wanted me to photograph the bell tower. Under the lake? She nodded. He said the light comes on down there when the water gets cold. I took the recorder from the dresser. The plastic casing was worn, and my mother's handwriting covered the label on the cassette. Call 26. October 14th. 2:13 in the morning. I opened the top drawer beneath it and found rows of tapes arranged in careful lines. 26 in all. Every label had a date, a time, and a name. Some names I recognized from old newspaper stories about drownings. Others meant nothing to me. The earliest recording was dated 9 years before Lucas died. The latest was made 2 nights before my mother passed away. Harper watched me read them. Grandma said they were wrong numbers. She lied. She was scared. At the bottom of the drawer was a folded sheet of paper. My mother's handwriting shook across the page, but the words were clear. Every call lasts 57 seconds. Every voice knows something it should not know. Every call contains one lie. Do not decide which sentence is false until the line goes dead. Below that, she had written one more warning. The lake does not call the dead. It calls the living with the dead person's voice. I read the note twice. Harper moved closer. She never showed me that. Did she know Lucas was calling you? I think so. The first time the phone rang, Grandma was standing in the hallway. She looked at me like she had been waiting for it. Why did you answer? Harper's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Because he said my name. The telephone in the kitchen rang. The sound cut through the house with such force that Harper grabbed my arm. We both stared toward the hallway. One ring, then another. The wall phone had no cord. I had checked it myself less than an hour earlier. Do not touch it, I said. We walked to the kitchen together. The receiver trembled against its cradle with every ring. I watched the clock above the stove change to 2:21. On the fourth ring, the answering machine clicked on. At first there was only static. Then Lucas spoke. Mara, Daniel is coming. His voice was soft, almost lost beneath the sound of water. He cut his right hand on the south dock. He will tell you the anchor line snapped. He is lying about why. Harper looked at me. I counted the seconds in my head. 23, 24. Lucas continued. Mom saved all the voices because she thought one of them would tell her how to bring me home. 36, 37. The static rose, and something knocked 3 times on the other end. Room 8, he whispered. Bellwether Exchange. At 57 seconds, a bell rang beneath the water, and the line went silent. I had barely reached for the receiver when headlights swept across the kitchen wall. A truck pulled into the gravel driveway and stopped beside the porch. Daniel stepped out wearing jeans, a canvas jacket, and the exhausted expression he had carried through our mother's funeral. He climbed the steps and knocked once before letting himself in. Why are all the lights on? He asked. Then I saw his right hand wrapped in a dish towel damp with lake water. Harper inhaled sharply. Daniel noticed us staring. What? I pointed at his hand. What happened? He looked down as though he had forgotten the injury. Anchor line snapped at the south dock. The room seemed to narrow around him. Outside, the lake was perfectly still. That is exactly what Lucas said you would tell me. I said. Daniel's face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. He closed the door behind him and locked it. Mara, he said quietly. You need to stop answering that phone. Daniel kept his back against the locked door as if he expected something from the lake to follow him inside. Water dripped from the towel around his hand and tapped against the kitchen floor with the steady rhythm of a clock. You heard Lucas? He asked. I watched his face carefully. Years of listening to emergency callers had taught me that fear changed a person's voice before it changed anything else. Daniel was afraid, but he was not surprised. He knew where you were, I said. He knew about the anchor line. Harper stood beside the counter, silent and tense. Daniel looked at her, then at the disconnected wall phone. How many calls? He asked. That does not answer my question. How many, Mara? 2 for me. 3 for Harper. His expression hardened. You should have told me. Harper stepped forward. Grandma told me not to. Your grandmother was not thinking clearly near the end. She was clear enough to record 26 calls. I said. Daniel looked toward the hallway. You found the tapes. I found names, dates, and a warning about one lie in every call. I also found Bellwether Exchange, room 8. His eyes moved away from mine. That was all the answer I needed. What is under the lake? I asked. An old town. I know that. What is room 8? Nothing you need to see. Lucas said Mom saved the voices because she thought one of them could bring him home. Daniel pulled the towel tighter around his palm. Lucas is not calling you. Then who is? I do not know. You know enough to be scared. He crossed the kitchen and lowered his voice. Graywater was built over Bellwether in 1958. The phone exchange, the church, and part of Main Street were left standing because the crews ran out of time. Most of the copper lines were never removed. Dad always said they should have been cut before the valley flooded. Why? Because after the first winter, people around the lake started getting calls. Harper looked at him. From dead people? From voices that sounded like them. Daniel told us to stay inside, then drove back toward the marina before sunrise. I did not trust him, so I called Noah Bennett as soon as the county office opened. Noah had been my closest friend before Lucas died, and the last person I wanted to see after returning to Graywater. 18 years had added lines around his eyes and a sheriff's badge to his coat, but he still tilted his head when he thought I was hiding something. We met at the county records building at 8:30. I showed him my mother's note, but kept the tapes in my bag. "You believe this?" he asked. "I believe a phone without a wire rang twice." "That is not the same thing." Daniel knew what it was. Noah studied the names on the cassette labels. Several belonged to people whose drownings had occurred while his father was sheriff. He led me into the archive room, where old flood maps and utility records were stored in metal cabinets. We found the original Bellwether plans beneath a stack of reservoir surveys. Bellwether's main street lay about 55 feet below the reservoir's surface. The top of the church tower rose to within 40 feet, and a narrow service tunnel connected its basement to the telephone exchange across the street. Room 8 was marked as the long-distance switching room. A web of copper lines spread from it toward homes and businesses that no longer existed. One line continued beyond the old flood boundary and ended at a property number I recognized. "My mother's house." "That cannot still be connected," Noah said. "The line was abandoned before the reservoir filled." Abandoned is not the same as removed. We found a contractor report stating that nearly 3 miles of armored cable had been left in place because pulling it out would have delayed the dam project. A handwritten note in the margin said that unusual current had been detected in the Bellwether line after flooding, but no source was found. A separate service memo described a failed relay bank that disconnected unanswered test calls after exactly 57 seconds whenever the exchange did not return a signal. Then Noah found a maintenance log from the summer after Lucas died. My father, Frank Ellison, had signed the log as a county utility technician, and my mother was listed as a civilian observer on a low-water inspection through the eastern spillway. Beside her name, someone had written Room 8. Noah photographed the pages. I traced the route with my finger from the house to Room 8. It was a straight line beneath Graywater Lake. At 11:17, my cell phone rang. The screen showed no number. Noah saw it and shook his head, but I answered. The sound of moving water filled my ear. "Mara," Lucas whispered. His voice was clearer than before. "You found the map." I looked at Noah. "Where is Harper?" I asked. "Daniel was with me the night I died." A bell trembled in the distance. "That is one statement," I said. "What are the others?" The line crackled, almost like laughter. My body was never brought out of the lake. I stopped breathing. I remembered the funeral. I remembered the closed casket, my mother's hand resting on polished wood, and Daniel standing beside me with his face turned away. "That is not true," I said. "Harper will disappear before sunset." The bell rang once. "Which one is the lie?" I asked. "You have to decide." "No." Mom said not to decide until the call ends. Silence stretched across the line. Then Lucas said, "Look at the dock." The call ended at 57 seconds. Noah drove me back to the house with the emergency lights off, but the speedometer near 70. The front door was open. Harper's overnight bag sat beside the couch. Her shoes were gone. On the kitchen table, we found my mother's map folded beneath a wet coffee mug. Someone had circled the bell tower in blue ink. I ran outside. The path to the lake was marked by damp footprints leading through the grass. At the dock, one cleat stood empty. Daniel's fishing boat was gone. So was Harper. Across the black surface of Graywater Lake, far beyond the reeds, a small light moved toward the place where Bellwether had drowned. The light on Graywater Lake went out before Noah could start the patrol boat, and in the darkness that followed, I heard my dead brother whisper my name from somewhere beneath the dock. I turned so quickly that my shoulder struck a piling, but there was no one behind me. Only black water pressed against the wood, rising and falling in small, careful movements. Noah unlocked the county boat and told me to stay close while he checked the fuel. I called Harper 3 times. Each call went directly to voicemail. On the 4th attempt, her phone rang once through my speaker, and a second ring answered from somewhere far across the lake. Noah heard it too. "That came from the water," he said. We left the dock at 11:42 in the morning, following the last direction of the moving light toward the drowned center of Bellwether. The lake was nearly empty of other boats. A cold wind pushed low clouds across the sky, turning daylight into a gray reflection that made distance difficult to judge. Noah used the radio to contact the marina, but no one had seen Daniel leave. 10 minutes later, we found his fishing boat drifting near the old flood boundary. The engine was off. One navigation light blinked weakly at the stern, and a narrow rental skiff was tied behind the boat with a short towline. Daniel stood alone near the console with both hands raised, as though he expected us to accuse him before we even came alongside. "Where is Harper?" I shouted. "She was not on the boat when I found it," he answered. Noah tied the two boats together and stepped aboard Daniel's vessel. A camera bag lay open near the passenger seat. Harper's jacket was folded beside it, still dry. Her phone was missing. "You told us you were going back to the marina," I said. "I did. Then how did your boat get out here?" Daniel looked toward the dark water beneath us. "Harper took it. Why would she leave her jacket?" "I do not know." His voice was controlled, but his right thumb kept rubbing the edge of the bandage around his hand. "She came to the marina asking about the bell tower. I told her to stay away from it. I went inside for less than 2 minutes. When I came back, the boat was gone." "You followed her?" Noah asked. "In a rental skiff. I found this drifting. No sign of her." I stared at the empty seat and remembered Lucas saying Harper would disappear before sunset. "There was a light moving toward Bellwether," I said. "Did you see it?" Daniel shook his head. "I saw something under the water. It looked like a flashlight moving along the old road." Noah searched the boat while I opened Harper's camera bag. The camera was still inside, but the memory card had been removed. In a side pocket, I found a folded page torn from my mother's notebook. The words Room 8 were written across the top, followed by a list of dates. One date was today. Beside it, my mother had written Mara remembers differently each time. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, sharp and sudden. For an instant, the lake vanished. I saw a smaller boat under a summer sky. Lucas stood near the bow, shouting at Daniel. Daniel grabbed him by the shoulders. The memory disappeared before I could hear the words. I nearly dropped the notebook page. "You were there," I said. Daniel looked at me without pretending not to understand. "The night Lucas died. You were on the lake." Noah stopped searching. Daniel lowered his gaze. "Yes." The admission made the world around me seem unnaturally quiet. "You lied for 18 years. I kept a promise." "To whom?" "Mom." "What happened?" Daniel looked toward Noah, then back at me. "Not here." We returned to the house shortly after 1 in the afternoon. Noah organized a search with 2 rescue teams, but the weather worsened, and the sonar equipment would take time to arrive. Daniel remained in the kitchen while I carried my mother's tapes into the living room. I selected the recording marked with Lucas's name and the date of his death. The cassette began with static, followed by my mother crying softly. Then Lucas said, "Mom, the lights are still on." The phrase matched the first call I had received, but something in his voice felt wrong. I rewound it and listened again. He pronounced the word lights with a hard, careful ending. Lucas had never spoken that way. He used to swallow the final sound, making the word almost disappear. I played the tape a 3rd time. The memory behind my eyes shifted. Now Daniel was not holding Lucas. Our father stood in the boat instead, pointing toward shore while Lucas leaned over the side. I stopped the tape. My hands had begun to shake. "What did Mom do to me?" I asked. Daniel was standing in the doorway. "She tried to protect you." "From what?" "From remembering." Water dripped somewhere in the hall. Noah checked the ceiling, but the plaster was dry. A wet footprint appeared beside the couch. Then another formed several feet away, facing toward my mother's bedroom. No one moved. The prints continued one by one, darkening the floorboards as though an invisible person had just climbed out of the lake. They stopped beside my coat. The phone inside the pocket began to ring. I answered before Noah could stop me. Lucas spoke immediately. Daniel held me under. Behind his voice, the bell rang once. My memory changed again. I saw Daniel above the water, his hands pressing down while Lucas struggled beneath the surface. The image felt so real that I could smell gasoline and sun-warmed wood. "Why?" I asked. He wanted me quiet. "What did you know?" "Ask him what Mom made him bury." The line filled with whispers. "One lie," I said. "Which part is the lie?" Lucas laughed softly, but it did not sound like him. "You already chose." The call ended. I turned toward Daniel with the phone still in my hand. "You held him under." His face tightened with pain, not guilt. "No, I remember it." "You remember whatever the calls give you." He said you buried something for Mom. Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked older than he had an hour earlier. "Mara, Mom spent years telling you the same version until it became the only one you could live with." "What version?" "That you were not on the boat." Outside, Every phone in the house began ringing at once. Every phone in the house rang for exactly 57 seconds, and when the final bell stopped, Noah's radio crackled with a message that turned my fear into something colder. One of the search teams had located Harper's phone beneath the surface near the old church tower, almost 2 miles from shore. Daniel moved before I did. He grabbed his jacket, but Noah blocked the doorway and told him to stay. "She is my daughter," Daniel said. "And you are injured," Noah answered. "The dive team is already moving." I looked at the wet footprints ending beside my coat and knew that waiting on shore would be impossible. "I am going with them," I said. Noah tried to argue, but he stopped when he saw my face. I had spent 18 years avoiding water, deeper than my knees. I had turned down lake trips, swimming pools, even hotel rooms with balconies facing the ocean. Yet Harper was somewhere beneath Graywater, and the voice using Lucas had chosen me long before I returned home. At the marina, the incident commander refused to let me enter the water until Noah confirmed that I had been certified before the accident. Noah had remained active with the county dive team for 9 years, and he made the conditions clear. I would stay directly behind him, remain tethered to the surface, and use a full-face mask with a hardwired communication line and a backup air cylinder. The crew put me through an equipment check in 12 feet of protected water before we left the dock. Even then, the dry suit and tanks felt heavy enough to pin me in place. Wind pushed small waves against the pilings, and every splash sounded like someone knocking from below. The upper windows of the church tower were about 40 feet beneath the surface, while the exchange sat closer to 55 feet. A tethered search camera had spotted Harper's phone blinking inside a clear waterproof housing near the bell chamber. Visibility was expected to be less than 6 feet. "Stay between us," Noah said through the communication unit. "Do not follow any light unless I confirm it." I wanted to ask whether he believed the stories now, but the answer was already in his voice. We entered the water just after 4 in the afternoon. The cold closed around me with such force that every muscle tightened. For several seconds I could not control my breathing inside the full-face mask. Then Noah touched my arm and pointed downward. We descended along a weighted line while a safety diver remained outside the structure with our guide tether. Daylight faded from gray to green, then to a darkness that swallowed the beam of my flashlight. Shapes began to appear below us. A roof, a chimney, the upper branches of trees that had been dead for nearly 70 years. Graywater had not erased Bellwether. It had preserved it in silence. The church emerged ahead, its steeple leaning slightly to one side. The bell chamber windows were empty black squares. As we approached, the earpiece inside my mask filled with static. Beneath the interference, I heard Lucas counting. 41, 42, 43. I signaled Noah, but he could not hear it. Something flashed inside the tower. We entered through a broken window and found Harper's phone sealed inside a clear dive housing and tied to the old bell rope with blue fishing line. The screen was still lit, although no ordinary signal should have reached it at that depth. A recording played without sound, showing Harper's face as she moved through a narrow concrete passage. Behind her, a row of tiny lights glowed beneath the water like windows along a street. Noah cut the phone free. When he turned it toward me, a message appeared on the screen. "Room 8. Below us." The bell moved. There was no current strong enough to shift it, yet the iron shape swung once, and the vibration traveled through the water into my chest. A doorway behind the altar had collapsed, revealing steps leading underground. Noah pointed toward the surface. I shook my head and showed him the video. Harper had gone through that passage. We followed the stairs into the church basement, where a narrow tunnel stretched toward the old telephone exchange. The ceiling was low, and cables ran along the walls like dark roots. After 40 feet, the passage rose into a compressed air pocket. We kept our masks sealed and stood waist-deep in water beneath a concrete ceiling. My flashlight revealed a rusted sign, painted with an arrow. Bellwether Telephone Exchange. The tunnel ended at a steel door marked 8. It opened when I touched it. The room beyond should have been flooded, but a sealed ventilation shaft rose toward the eastern spillway and had preserved a compressed pocket of air near the ceiling. Noah pulled a compact gas meter from a waterproof pouch and checked the air. The reading showed breathable air and no dangerous gases, but he warned me that we could remain only briefly. We climbed onto a row of metal cabinets, removed our masks, and pulled ourselves inside. Dozens of black telephones covered the walls. Some rested on shelves. Others hung from cords disappearing into the floor. None of them rang, but every receiver trembled against its cradle. At the center of the room stood an old switching board with hundreds of cables connected across its face. A reel-to-reel recorder beside it was turning. My own voice came through its speaker. I sounded 17. "Lucas, stop following me," the recording said. "I am leaving." I could not remember ever saying those words. Noah found a list pinned to the wall. Names filled 4 pages in my mother's handwriting. The maintenance log at the county archive explained how she had reached the room after Lucas died. Evelyn Ellison appeared 43 times. Harper Ellison appeared once. My name was written at the bottom, followed by that day's date and a time that had not happened yet. 6:17 in the evening. "Mara," Noah said, "we have to leave." One of the wall phones rang. The sound was deafening inside the small room. I lifted the receiver. For several seconds, I heard only my own breathing. Then a woman spoke. She had my voice, but it was older, rougher, filled with panic. "Listen carefully," she said. "Lucas is not the one calling." I gripped the phone. "Who are you?" "You know who I am." "Where is Harper?" "Alive for now. She is in the flood control tunnel below the exchange." I looked at Noah and pointed downward. He began searching the floor. "How do we reach her?" I asked. "Do not trust the lights. Do not answer the next voice that sounds like your mother. And whatever you remember about the boat, it is not finished yet." Water began pouring through the vents near the ceiling. The air pocket shrank around us. "What is down here?" I asked. The older version of my voice whispered, "Not a ghost. Not Lucas. It is the line itself." The call ended at 57 seconds. Every receiver in room 8 lifted from its cradle at the same time. From all of them came Harper's voice, repeating one sentence in perfect unison. "Aunt Mara, I found the door." A corroded section of floor plating beside Noah buckled with a deep metallic groan. A current pulled the water downward, revealing a narrow hatch hidden under the switching board. Beyond it, a ladder descended into darkness. Then my mother's voice came from the nearest telephone. "Bertie," she said gently, "do not go down there." I closed my eyes, remembering the rule. Every call contained one lie. When I opened them again, Noah was staring at the rising water, and the hatch below us had begun to close. The hatch was 3 inches from closing when Noah drove his dive knife into the hinge and shouted for me to move. My mother's voice continued through the telephone behind us, soft and patient, calling me Bertie the way she had when I was small enough to believe she could protect me from anything. "Do not go down there," she repeated. Water climbed past my chest. I stared at the black opening beneath the switching board and tried to decide which part of the call was the lie. The voice could be false. The warning could be false. Or the thing below us might truly be worse than the room filling with water. Noah pulled the hatch open far enough to expose the ladder, but a surge rushed upward from the darkness and struck the underside with enough force to wrench it from his hand. The metal door slammed shut. At the same moment, every telephone in room 8 began speaking in my mother's voice. "Leave Harper," they said together. "She is already gone." That was the lie. I knew it before the 57 seconds ended, not because I understood the rules, but because the older version of my own voice had said Harper was alive. I grabbed the reel-to-reel recorder and tore the spinning tape free. The voices stopped. Noah pointed toward the tunnel. The trapped air was almost gone, and we had no choice but to retreat. We resealed our full-face masks and followed the cable line passage back toward the church. The current had grown stronger, pulling at our tanks and dragging loose wires along the floor. Halfway through the tunnel, my flashlight swept across a rusted junction box marked flood control access. An arrow pointed down through the concrete beneath us. Harper was somewhere on the other side, but the entrance had been sealed by a steel plate. Noah photographed the location and pushed me onward. We reached the church tower with less than 10 minutes of reserve air remaining. As we rose through the bell chamber, something moved outside. The window. It had the height and shape of a teenage boy, suspended upright in the water with one hand resting against the stone. My light crossed his face, and for a heartbeat I saw Lucas exactly as he had looked at 15. Then he smiled. Lucas had a crooked front tooth from falling off his bicycle when he was 9. The boy outside the tower had perfect teeth. I looked away, and when I turned back, the window was empty. We surfaced near the rescue boat shortly after 5. The sky had darkened, and rain moved across the lake in silver sheets. Daniel was waiting at the marina when we returned. He ran toward us asking about Harper, but I pushed the wet reel of tape against his chest. "She is alive," I said. "She is below the exchange, and you are going to tell me what happened before I go back for her." Noah led us into the marina office while the rescue team prepared equipment for the flood tunnel. Daniel sat across from me beneath a wall covered with old fishing photographs. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he asked what I remembered. "I remember you holding Lucas under the water." Daniel closed his eyes. "That never happened. I saw it. You saw what the calls wanted you to see." He placed both hands on the table. "You were on the boat that night, Mara. Not me. Not Dad. You." The room seemed to lose all sound except the rain against the windows. Daniel continued before I could speak. "You were 17. You had packed a bag because you were planning to leave home. You took Dad's boat after midnight. Lucas found out and followed you to the dock. He thought he could talk you out of going." A memory flickered behind my eyes. A red duffel bag. Lucas standing barefoot on the dock. My hand on the ignition key. "No," I whispered. "Mom said I was asleep." "Mom lied." Daniel's voice shook. "She lied because you could not live with what you remembered." The image returned in broken pieces. Lucas climbing aboard. The engine starting. Moonlight on the water. "We argued," Daniel said. "You told him he was the reason you could never leave. He grabbed the wheel. You pulled it back. The boat struck one of the old bellwether markers. I saw the bow turn sharply. I heard Lucas shout my name. Then the lake rose around us. Not as a violent memory, but as cold darkness, confusion, and the terrible absence of air. Lucas pushed you toward a floating cushion," Daniel said. "He kept you above the surface until the current separated you. I arrived in a second boat after Mom woke me. I found you alone. What about Lucas?" "We searched until morning. They recovered a body 2 days later, but Mom would not let you see it. She said you had already suffered enough." "Was it him?" Daniel looked down. "I never knew for certain. The face was not identifiable, and Dad handled the identification. The casket stayed closed." Lucas's second statement returned to me. "My body was never brought out of the lake." I had assumed that was the lie. Daniel had confirmed he was not with Lucas when he died, which meant the first statement had been false. The second could be true. I gripped the edge of the table. "What did Mom make you bury?" Daniel reached into his jacket and placed a small metal box between us. Inside was a damaged cassette and a silver charm shaped like a bird. "This is why my hand is cut," he said. "Mom wired the box beneath the south dock and made me promise never to bring it up. When the call started again, I tried to retrieve it. The box's retrieval wire had wrapped around an anchor rope. The rope snapped while I was pulling it free." He touched the damp bandage. "She recorded you the morning after the accident. You told her the phones under the lake had been ringing before the boat hit the marker. You said Lucas heard his own voice calling from beneath the water. Mom made me hide the tape because she thought listening would bring the calls back." Noah entered carrying Harper's phone in its waterproof housing. "A technician recovered one photograph that had uploaded to her cloud account before the phone went under," he said. "Her camera is still missing its memory card, so she must have taken the card with her." The recovered photograph showed Harper standing beside a concrete entrance near the old spillway before she went onto the lake. Behind her was a faded sign reading "Emergency Flood Tunnel, Bellwether. Access." In the dark water reflected over her shoulder stood the shape of Lucas. On the back of his raised hand, written as though beneath the skin, was a time, 6:17. I looked at the clock on the marina wall. It was 5:52. Then every radio in the building came alive with Harper's voice. "Aunt Mara," she whispered, "the water is coming in." Harper's voice vanished beneath a burst of static, and the clock on the marina wall changed to 5:53. Noah grabbed the flood tunnel map while Daniel reached for the keys to his truck, but I stopped him. "You are staying here," I said. "She is my daughter, and the thing beneath the lake knows every secret you have kept from her. It will use your voice the same way it used Lucas." Daniel looked ready to argue. Then the damaged cassette inside the metal box began to turn even though there was no recorder attached to it. A faint voice came from the tangled strip of tape. My mother was crying. "I kept answering because I wanted my son back," she whispered. "Every time I listened, it learned another piece of him." The tape stopped. Noah radioed the rescue crew to follow by the service road. Then he and I left the marina at 5:55 and drove toward the abandoned spillway on the eastern shore. Rain struck the windshield so hard that the road disappeared beyond the headlights. We reached the fence 5 minutes after 6. The entrance shown in Harper's photograph stood behind rusted chain link and waist-high weeds. Noah cut the old lock, and we followed a concrete stairway beneath the hillside. At 6:12, the radios on our belts began ringing like telephones. I did not answer. The tunnel smelled of wet stone and rust. Red emergency lights flickered along the ceiling. Although the county records said the electrical system had been disconnected in 1981, water covered the floor to our ankles and moved steadily toward the lake. Harper called again through Noah's radio. "I am in the chamber below room 8, she said. "There is a wheel on the wall, but it will not turn." "We are coming," Noah answered. "Do not listen to anyone else." A second voice entered the transmission. It was Daniel. "Harper, open the lower gate." I looked at Noah. Daniel had remained at the marina. "Do not open anything," I said. "That is not your father." The false Daniel laughed softly. "Mara always says that when she is afraid." The radios went silent at 6:17. Ahead of us, the tunnel divided into 3 passages. The center route was marked Bellwether access. The left passage carried the sound of Harper crying. The right passage glowed with a row of warm lights that looked like windows at night. I remembered the warning from my older voice. "Do not trust the lights." Noah and I chose the center passage. The cries stopped immediately. A few seconds later, Lucas spoke from behind us. "Wrong way, Mara." I did not turn. We reached a steel ladder descending through a circular shaft. Water rushed below. Noah went first, and I followed into a maintenance chamber beneath the old exchange. Harper stood on a narrow platform 20 feet away, separated from us by a channel of fast-moving water. Her face was pale, but she was unharmed. Behind her, a large valve wheel was fixed to the wall beside a sealed floodgate. "The door closed after I came in," she shouted. "The water keeps rising." Noah studied the channel. A metal service bridge had retracted into the wall. The control panel beside us was dark. Above it hung a black telephone. It rang once. Then again. "Do not answer," Noah said. "We need the bridge. And the bridge needs power." I lifted the receiver. My mother spoke immediately. "Bertie, I can help you save her." "You are not my mother." "No, but I remember being her." The answer chilled me more than any denial could have. "What are you?" I asked. A connection. Water flowed around the platform beneath Harper. People left Bellwether, but they left their lines behind. Then the lake covered the town, and everyone who called into grief gave us something to carry. Us. Every voice that was never answered. Every confession that came too late. Every lie repeated until someone believed it. The switching mechanism inside the wall clicked. The service bridge moved out 6 inches, then stopped. "What do you want?" I asked. The truth spoken through the line. "Whose truth?" "Yours." Lucas's voice replaced my mother's. "Tell me why you left me." The memory returned with painful clarity. The boat under moonlight. My duffel bag near the console. Lucas begging me not to leave home. My anger, sharp and careless. The impact against the submerged marker. His hand pushing the floating cushion toward me while the current pulled him away. I had spent 18 years turning his final kindness into a punishment I believed I deserved. "I did not leave you beneath the lake," I said. "You saved me." The bridge extended another foot. Harper watched from the other platform, tears on her face. Lucas appeared behind the glass window beside her. He looked 15, wet hair across his forehead, his crooked tooth visible when he smiled. For 1 second, I wanted him to be real. "You let go of my hand," he said. The old guilt rose inside me, but beneath it was the memory I had refused to accept. His fingers had not slipped from mine. He had pushed me away from the sinking boat and toward safety. "That is the lie," I said. The telephones throughout the tunnel began ringing. "You did not stay because of me. You chose to save me, and I am sorry that I turned your last act into the reason I stopped living." The service bridge extended fully. Noah crossed first and reached Harper as the water climbed over the edge of her platform. I followed, carrying my mother's damaged cassette. Beside the valve wheel, I found an old tape player with 2 corroded leads clipped into the telephone circuit. It had no batteries, yet the empty reel was turning. I inserted my mother's cassette and pressed play. Her voice filled the chamber. "My name is Evelyn Ellison. My son Lucas died saving his sister. I changed the story because I thought guilt would destroy her. I made Daniel lie. I answered the calls because hearing Lucas mattered more to me than understanding what was speaking. Every time I answered, I gave the lake another memory. I am sorry. The bell beneath Graywater rang once. All the voices stopped. The valve wheel turned by itself, opening the emergency gate. Water drained from the chamber, and a second passage appeared beyond the wall. Noah led Harper through it while I looked back at the glass. Lucas stood on the other side, but the smile was gone. He raised one hand in farewell. This time, the crooked tooth was there. I whispered his name, and the lights beneath Bellwether went dark. Then the telephone beside me rang again. My own older voice answered before I touched it. "Mara," she said. "You saved Harper, but you did not close the line." The older version of my voice disappeared beneath a rising wave of static, and for one terrible second I thought the chamber was filling again. Then Noah grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the open passage. Harper was already ahead of us, moving carefully through the narrow concrete tunnel while water drained around her boots. Behind me, the telephone kept ringing. I did not answer. Each ring followed us deeper into the passage, even after the chamber vanished from sight. We climbed a rusted ladder and emerged through a service hatch near the eastern spillway just as the storm began to weaken. Daniel was waiting beyond the fence with 2 deputies and a rescue crew. Harper ran to him, and he held her so tightly that neither of them spoke. I stood several feet away, soaked, exhausted, and listening for a bell that did not come. Graywater Lake looked ordinary in the fading light. That was the most frightening thing about it. By morning, the county had closed the flood tunnel and declared the entire Bellwether section unsafe. Noah filed a report that blamed structural failure, abandoned utility equipment, and an unauthorized entry into a restricted area. It was not the truth, but it was the only version anyone outside our family would have believed. Daniel and I spent the next 2 days in my mother's house listening to every tape she had left behind. Most of the voices belonged to people who had drowned in Graywater over the years. Some begged to be found. Some mourned their families away. Some knew things that happened long after their deaths. Every recording lasted 57 seconds, and every one contained a statement that could not be true. On the final tape, my mother explained why she had kept answering. She also described how my father had taken her through the eastern spillway during the low-water inspection and how she had pinned the handwritten list inside room 8. She believed that if she collected enough calls, she could separate Lucas from whatever was speaking through him. Instead, she taught it how he laughed, how he pronounced my name, and how he sounded when he was afraid. Grief had become a library, and the line beneath the lake had learned to read. Daniel and I told Harper everything. We told her about the night of the accident, the closed casket, the lie our mother repeated until I believed I had been asleep at home. We told her that Lucas had saved me. Daniel admitted that he had spent 18 years protecting our mother's version because he thought the truth would destroy what remained of our family. Harper listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked only one question. Was the person calling me ever really Uncle Lucas? I thought of the figure behind the glass, the crooked tooth, and the hand raised in farewell. Maybe for one moment, I said. Or maybe it knew that was what I needed to see. Noah reopened the identification from 18 years earlier. Preliminary genetic testing proved that the remains buried under Lucas's name were not related to our family. In December, a forensic database identified them as Aaron Pike, a 16-year-old from a neighboring county who had disappeared 2 weeks before Lucas. The original file showed that my father had made the identification without dental records, apparently believing that a grave would give my mother closure and keep investigators from questioning me. Aaron's family finally received an answer, while ours was left with the truth that Lucas had never been recovered. 3 weeks later, the county hired a contractor to fill the Bellwether access tunnel with concrete. Divers sealed the entrance to room 8, removed the surviving cables near the church, and cut the old line leading toward my mother's property. Noah watched every step. Daniel watched from his boat. I remained on shore. When the last section was sealed, every telephone in the marina rang once. No one answered. After that, the calls stopped. The lake gave up several things during the winter drawdown. Harper's missing memory card washed onto the shore near the spillway. The final photographs showed the flooded streets of Bellwether, the church tower, and rows of lights glowing behind windows that had been underwater for nearly 70 years. The last image was different. It showed me standing inside room 8 beside the switching board. I was older, My hair streaked with gray, one hand holding a telephone receiver. The file metadata claimed the photograph had been taken 11 years earlier, even though Harper had bought the camera that spring. She deleted the image after showing it to me, but sometimes I still see it when I close my eyes. In January, Aaron Pike's remains were returned to his family, and Daniel and I replaced the grave marker bearing Lucas's name with a memorial stone near our family plot. We kept the date of his disappearance and changed the words beneath it. The stone now said that he had brought his sister home. For the first time in 18 years, I stood near Graywater without feeling that the lake was waiting for me to look away. I sold my mother's house in the spring. Daniel kept the marina. Harper returned to college and began studying documentary photography. Noah and I spoke occasionally, never about bellwether, though every conversation ended with the same question. Any calls? For 6 months, the answer was no. Then I returned to emergency dispatch. I chose a city more than 600 miles from Graywater, far from any shoreline, and convinced myself distance mattered. The first weeks were ordinary. Car trouble, lost children, medical emergencies, arguments between neighbors. Real voices with real locations. Problems that belong to the living. On a cold Tuesday night in October, at exactly 2:13 in the morning, a call entered my console without a number or location. The system identified it only as an open line. I placed my headset over my ears. Emergency services. What is your location? At first, there was only water. Then a woman began to cry. My husband drowned last winter, she said. I live near Red Pine Lake. I had never heard of it. Are you in danger now? I asked. I do not know. The phone in our basement started ringing, but it is not connected to anything. When I answered, someone under the lake told me to ask for Mara Ellison. My hands went cold. What else did the voice say? The woman hesitated. It said you would know which part was false. A bell rang beneath her words. Not the bell from Graywater. This one was higher, faster, almost cheerful. My screen timer reached 41 seconds. I heard another voice enter the line, faint and familiar. It was my own voice, older than the one in room 8. Mara, listen carefully, she whispered. The line was never beneath Graywater. Graywater was only where it learned your name. What do I tell her? I asked. Tell her not to answer again. The woman on the line gasped. There is another phone ringing upstairs. The timer reached 54 seconds. My older voice spoke faster. There are 2 lies this time. Which statements? I asked. One is hers. The timer reached 56. And one is mine. At 57 seconds, the call ended. Across the dispatch center, every inactive line illuminated at once. My console filled with incoming calls from addresses clustered around lakes across the country, and through my silent headset, Lucas whispered, Mara, this time, do not let anyone answer.